Hi, and welcome to Deer IQ, where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, 20-plus year educator, 30-plus year deer hunter, untastefully seasoned outdoor writer, and I'm here to help you achieve what we all hope for, to be truly greater deer hunters. This is part 4 in our series, Public Land Hunting Mastery, and asking the question, is public land hunting ruined? Today we're with my friend Manny, and we're going to jump ahead a little bit in our series as we look at and discuss hunting systems. This is related to our current topic in public land hunting, so I thought I'd throw it in. And looking at systems he used to get cracks at a true monster on public land in Michigan. As we start, I want to challenge you to do a couple things. First, download our free journal to use with this podcast. That's really going to help. Second, as you do that, here are the top look-fors or things to look for during this episode. What is Manny's initial approach to find bucks on public land? How did he establish a buck named Frazier's routines instead of trying to pattern them? How does Manny use trail cameras much differently than most? And what vital intel does this give him? And there's a ton more in there. There really is. It's an awesome story. You'll want to listen good on this one, guys. And I have a few challenges at the end that I believe will truly take your hunting up several notches. So make sure you stick around and listen for those. And now let's get to the podcast and up your deer IQ. All right, here we are. I'm here with Manni Ferraiuolo. And welcome to the podcast, Manny.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
We are in the season-long theme of trying to answer the question and look at what it takes to be a greater deer hunter and looking at great hunters to really try to answer that question, try to, for all of us, to be greater hunters. And we're in the series within that, the systems of great deer hunters. And one thing that I've noticed over the years from a lot of what I'd call much greater deer hunters is they have systems for things. They have ways of doing things that really go to work for them. And Manny is no exception to this and is the reason why I have him on the podcast today. To get started here, though, what is a system? Just to define that, it's a set of procedures according to which something is done. It's organized, an organized method, and it's something. When you look at deer hunting, it's repeatable. It makes work easier. It really goes to work for you and tames what I call chaos and Murphy, or the law of Murphy, which is going against every deer hunter, right? And that's one of the biggest things we can do is really to minimize the effects of those. And it really, a system automates success. So a lot of these greater deer hunters or guys that have a lot of experience, they've come up with these, I've noticed. And I really highly suggest every hunter be working on those. And Manny definitely has some of those that he's going to share with us here today. So before we jump into this, I know Manny, it's kind of an interesting story. I met Manny arm wrestling. And I will have to say we were just first starting arm wrestling. And I beat Manny, so I'm 1-0 against Manny, but I haven't been arm wrestling the last couple of years, and he has, is really one of the better arm wrestlers in the state of Michigan. So, but that's my claim to fame. But that's how we met, and there probably won't be a rematch because now I can claim forever and just let you get better and better and better and claim I'm undefeated. But anyways, through that's how we met, and we started talking and realized we're both deer hunters. And he starts telling me about this public land Michigan buck he'd been chasing for several years, which was this monster. And when someone says that, you don't know what they mean when they say monster, right? That's different for different people. Yeah. And then later on, he sends me these pictures and I realized that, this was a monster. And this is we're going to get into the story of this buck named Frazier. And so if you want to, before we jump into that, Manny, anything else that I need to add there just to introduce you to people out there that wouldn't know you?
I'm not really. Arm wrestling and deer hunting and and singing at church are about my passions. I do arm wrestling so much now. I stopped coaching baseball. So, and every getting close to around this time of year, end of July, beginning of July, start food plots or whatever on my own private stuff. And I'm start morphing from an arm wrestler to a deer hunter.
But you're always a deer hunter. And Manny is in Michigan, and this is a public land deer, which is another crazy part about this. And I'll link the story below. I actually wrote a story about this for a Michigan magazine, the buck named Frazier, and it's really just a phenomenal story in general. But we want to really take a look at your systems and how you track this buck over 5 seasons, had many encounters with him, and we'll save the ending of the story, but there's a lot to learn from this encounter with this just mega giant public land Michigan buck. So let's start there with just a brief overview. Tell us about Frazier.
Frazier, well, my previous bow hunting experience was up north in the big woods. So when you come down south to ag fields and different fingers of stuff, I found a piece of state land, looked pretty good on a map, decided I'd go in. And my approach to finding deer is very simplistic in certain ways. You go to, every deer goes to food. Now, they might go to food in the middle of the night, like those ag fields, but they're going to show up there. So I normally start off by walking around and pinpointing spots on the fields that I want to check, corners, things like that butt up to bedding or whatever. And I'll throw out a camera, and I'll start there, and whatever shows up, I expect it to be well after dark. And then I'll track it backwards from there. Back into wherever it's going. So I did that. It was no exception to anything that I did. I go out to this new place. I pinpointed a couple spots. I walk around the perimeter of these fields until I see a ton of traffic coming out in certain locations. I throw up a camera, and to my surprise, a bachelor group of bucks was showing up in daylight on the alfalfa field. So, and I was only planning on going to this ground to set up for my daughter's youth hunt at the time. And I found that bachelor group, and I'm like, there's a couple nice bucks in here. So 2 of them were identical, 9-pointers. And the only way to really tell them apart was the brow tines were slightly different on one. And one had 5 on one side and 4 on the other, and the other one was reversed. So that was like other than that, they were like picture perfect identical. So I was quite surprised to see them showing up there on the alfalfa field. So I'm like, well, they're not going to stay through this long. And lo and behold, they did. It was the 2nd of October. I got a pretty good wind, and I got on there, and one of the 9-pointers came out probably an hour before dark. I mean, it's unheard of on state land. And I put an arrow in them. And it didn't penetrate the penetration that I wanted, but I even brought a dog tracking dog out there. We never found that deer, presumed to be dead. So then the rest of the year, I went after the other one and played cat and mouse. And me trying to find that deer, I was learning the ground as well. And then the off season, I'm like, well, obviously there's some decent bucks there, so I'm going to spend some time over there and maybe learn the ground better than I would have. And that's when I started. I threw out a couple mineral licks, which is one of the things I did at the time. You can't do that anymore, which we'll get into in 2019, how that changed Frazier and everything. But in the beginning, I threw out some mineral licks and got them in early summer and got them in velvet. Kind of disappeared sporadically throughout that year. Hunted them, had a few encounters, and then in 2000, I think it was 17, he started developing like kickers and flyers, and I'm like, he's nicer than the normal deer. I better put more effort into it. I think it was 2000.
So, what was the first year, just to give us a picture?
First year,
here.
I believe, was 2015, if I remember.
Okay, yep. Yep. And he was how old would you say he was at that time?
I think he was about 3.5, 2.5, 3.5.
Okay.
My guess would be right in there. I think 3.5. They both had bigger bodies than the average 2.5-year-old deer. There, it wasn't just the rack size that I was guesstimating that off of, obviously, but I'm pretty positive he was probably 3.5. It would not be out of the realm of possibility for 2.5, but I would bet 3.5 at the time. And then 2017, I put a lot of effort into him in 2017. And in doing so, you had to put a lot of effort into the property. And the property is a really unique property. Normally, you find this in a lot of hunters, like they'll go to a property and they're like, the hardcore DIY guys, like they're going to out hike everybody and they're going to go to the thickest stuff and you're going to do the kayaks back there and you're going to do all of that kind of stuff. And that's all in your head to do. And on this particular piece of property, you can't really do it. If you hike, there's multiple roads that crisscross the property, so that cut right through it. So if you hike through one, you're just going to hit another road that somebody can park on and come the opposite direction on. And so it made it a little bit unique from what, like, growing up in the big woods, like I just out hike everybody and go to spots that people weren't. So it was a little bit of an adjustment for me. I couldn't really rely on that tactic anymore. And then there's this huge marsh, that swamp that's hundreds of acres. And I think I've sent you a video of it. Like, you turn around in it and it's just reeds everywhere, 14 feet tall. And there's just little cattle trails through there. And like, you can't get back there without busting everything out. Like, it's impossible to be quiet. So that's why they get big. Not to mention, when people do go in there and bust them out, Frazier, what I found out, would always go over to this private land spot that bordered up to a condo complex. And I mean, where I found him bedding, I did the walking trails, the public walking trails back through there, and where I found him bedding was, within throw stone's distance of people's door at this condos complex.
So in 2015, you had your first encounters. You wounded this buck, never found it. He was the other one. You started chasing him in 2016, and then in 2017, he kind of blew up. And so it was kind of game on in 2017, which he was probably a 5 or 6 year old deer on Michigan public land, which is super rare, right? Even a 3-year-old is a pretty good buck, but. So that's when it was kind of like game on, and you started patterning him, it sounds like, right? You figured out where he was, how he was staying alive, where he was living, this cattail marsh, all this stuff. So how are you getting this? How are you figuring this stuff out? Can you go a little more detail with that as you're telling the story here?
I got off track a little bit.
Hi, this is Adam Lewis with DeerIQ.com, and this is your High IQ Moment. Do you know how to find a sanctuary that holds big bucks? Well, our third tip is to look for impenetrable cover. If you can see more than a few yards into it, then it's probably not thick enough. The deer have to feel very secure, and a high stem count area is critical. Having a good visual barrier will also work to your advantage. If you cannot see them, then they cannot see you. This allows you to access the sanctuary unseen and only left to worry about your scent and sound that you make. Thick brush, cattails, weeds and grasses, and early stage clear-cut type undergrowth can create such cover. If your natural human reaction is to avoid it because it's too thick and impenetrable, that should be telling the hunter in you not to. Read the full article on keys to find buck sanctuaries linked below, along with our free public land hunting guide with detailed new strategies to beat the crowds and still find success. And do you know your deer IQ? Are you really deer smart? Take our Deer IQ test link below and find out. Trust me, it's fun, and share it with a buddy and see who really has a higher deer IQ. And now, let's get back to the podcast. how are you getting this? How are you figuring this stuff out? Can you go a little more detail with that as you're telling the
Yeah,
story
I
here?
got off track a little bit.
No.
What I would do in the early season, I'm talking early season, would be directly after you're shed hunting, early season, is do all the same intel that a lot of people do. You go through the woods when nothing's there and you can see everywhere, and you're shed hunting and you're looking at where they were all yarded up and all that kind of intel. But then I'll start putting out mineral licks in case of him. And I started strategically placing them. I wouldn't like go to where I thought he was. I would put him where I wanted him to be, or closer to where I wanted him to be. And I'd haul out hundreds of pounds at the time of these mineral licks. These deer were just destroying them and digging holes in the ground. And so I'd haul out mineral licks. I had my own concoction that I don't do it anymore. You're not allowed to, so I haven't done it in a while. It was a very simple thing from growing up on a farm. And I would go out there and I'd dump out mineral licks. I'd put cameras over it. And that was the early season that I did. Then you get into around, and I'd get him on him. I'd have videos and stuff with him just stubs as he's huge clubs coming off of his head. And you know that's him. And you watch him grow through all that stuff. He got really finicky in 2017 around cameras. You put out a camera, and if he spotted it, he wasn't coming back. I don't know what it was. I've had deer be a little skittish around cameras before, bucks that is, but nothing like him. Like he'd almost look for them, and if he spotted one, he just left. So I had to be pretty strategic of where I placed those and how I placed them.
So this is like in, let's say, June, July-ish at some point. Yeah.
So
and when he was like 5 years old, he probably is where he kind of changed and all of a sudden got.
Yeah, he started getting too smart for his own good. So mineral licks were a big thing, and I didn't know exactly how big of a thing they were until 2019 when I didn't put them out. What I found out that I was doing is I was patterning his summer patterns based on where I was putting those licks. And so he wasn't necessarily in the places that he wanted to be because those licks determined his daily routine. And so when you establish a routine, I didn't even realize it at the time, but I was establishing his routine, which is why I got so many more photos of him than any other hunter, because I knew what he was doing, why he was doing it. And then from the traffic I got on those cameras, then I started picking out, okay, where he's coming from and the trails he's coming from crisscross with where I know doe bedding areas are. And so I would go to those spots in like May, June. I would pick out where I would want to hunt that specific location, doe bedding area, entry, exit, all that kind of stuff. And I'd pick out where I want to hunt it, how I want to hunt it. I'd pick out the wind direction, everything for thinking of late October, beginning of November. And I would say, he's going to be here. If I bring him here, where do I want to hunt? And then I'd pick out the tree, I'd pick out everything. And then from there, I would make a mock scrape. So what's the wind direction? What's the thermals usually in that time if I'm in a position for that? And then from there, I would make a mock scrape. My mock scrapes, a lot of people use ropes and a whole bunch of other stuff. I tend to be less is more, especially as a state land hunter. I tend to be less is more for the scents and for things that aren't just natural to the surrounding. I think one of the biggest things of setting a mock scrape earlier in the year is getting the deer used to using it all year. I have scrapes that I've put out for Frazier that I haven't touched in years, and I guarantee you I can go out there and beginning of October, mid-October, and the whole area, the licking branches are used all year long. And I haven't touched them. I haven't refreshed them. I haven't done anything to them, and they are now part of the deer community. And I know I can go to those spots and hunt and have success. But I'd set up a licking branch. I would use what was natural to that location, usually either white oak or some kind of evergreen that I would hang or bend over into a spot that I wanted. And I would usually just expose the dirt underneath. Sometimes put just natural, just straight doe urine in it. expose the dirt, have the branch there, and sometimes, depending on the time of year, put or like a rack rub or whatever on it and let it be. And then anytime they were stopped using it a little bit, I'd go out there and refresh it, redo something, give it more activity until it just becomes something that was their telephone pole, and that's where it was. And if you do it early enough in the year, and if you plan it all out in that kind of a situation, you're literally planning out where he's going to be in the early rut, and you're planning out how you're going to kill him and in what wind patterns and time of year you're going to kill him and where you expect him to be coming from and why.
That's really big. Let me just pause right here, because a lot of people go out, and especially in public and again, there's a lot of pressure, right? There's a lot of other guys hunting these areas. They will try to pattern the deer, right? You're saying you are going to set his pattern. That's what you're trying to do. And then you are determining when I can kill him, if I can get him to start habituating himself to things like the salt lick and the mock scrapes, right?
Correct.
I think that's a kind of a paradigm shift. That's like a reversal for a lot of people. I'll just kind of summarize this. It's, you found a buck in an area, right? You knew his general area. You started getting more details about him off season and through just hunting, right? This was 5 seasons. So you're accumulating this data, but you found his area in the buck you wanted to hunt. You then started patterning him or getting him habituated to where you wanted him to be through things like your mock scrapes and your salt licks. I think that's big. That's really big. I just wanted to point that out before we just
unfortunately
kept
can't
going.
do salt licks anymore, because that I didn't find out until 2019 how big of a deal that those were.
And that's in Michigan we're talking, folks. So you might in other states, but yeah, Michigan changed rules. So, okay, keep going. Sorry, I had to just jump in there for a second.
And then what I started learning around 2017 in my efforts to pattern Frazier, I was starting to learn that, and the ground is a little different because you can't, like we've already said, I couldn't out hike people or outdo anything. So like, where is he going? Why is he going there? And then right around September, all of a sudden everything, that's one of the times on state land, beginning middle of September, it's one of those times that everything changes. The summer pattern's gone. And that happens on my personal, like private ground too, obviously, but I'm talking, it's differently on state land because the deer get used to their summer pattern and no pressure from people. And then all of a sudden you start seeing parking lots start filling up, and all of a sudden cameras go dark or they get stolen or like you just go through. And I started learning, and I use cameras now a lot still. I know a lot of people who don't use cameras anymore. I still use cameras a ton. I just use them a little differently than I used to. I used to use them to find the deer and hunt the deer. Now I'm using them to find the deer and hunt the deer a little, but mostly as my intel for the next year. And then I use the cameras probably more predominantly now on state land anyway to pattern the hunter. Because when the hunters show up on a very high pressured state land where I'm at, the deer change based on the pressure that they're getting. So where are the hunters parking primarily? Where are they going primarily? What times are they doing it? And then how can I use all of that stuff to my advantage? So
again, I'm going to pause here. So are you literally putting these cameras on parking lots and stuff like that to monitor the hunters, or are you picking this stuff up?
Close to them. I'll still throw a lot of cameras in like corners of like food plots or ag fields where, number one, it's going to catch that corner. There's probably going to be a scrape to show up in the middle of the night at some point anyway. I'll get whatever buck does that in the middle of the night. It's not going to be intel that I can hunt over, but he was at this place at 10:30 at night, and it's something to go on. But then it's also, what time is this hunter coming in here, and where direction is he going? And he's going into this thicket from this direction at around this time every weekend or whatever it is. So I could show up on the other side of that thicket earlier than he gets there, and I can let him push everything to me.
Yeah,
So
that's very different. It is you're doing both. You're getting deer information, but you're focusing on hunter information. You're hunting the other hunters basically.
yes,
Yeah.
because the deer adjust to them. So I learned I have to adjust to them.
Yep.
So, for instance, Frazier, he's adjusting to all this hunting pressure that starts showing up in the beginning of September, beginning to middle of September. Sometimes, I mean, it's like a couple days before October 1st, and just cars everywhere. So he's adjusting, and his normal summer pattern that he was comfortable going in, he's no longer comfortable. And so, where is he going now? And how is he's adjusting to it? So I have to adjust with him and find out where that is and how can I use this information to my benefit. Um, and shockingly enough, like when you start trying to figure out like where is he going, some of the obvious places, and I think it was at this point I created the map, because
The
I'm
map.
literally trying to figure out where he's going. So what I started doing, and I've told you this, I finally got serious about him specifically in this plot of ground. Um, and all through the summer, I'd get all these photos, and so I created the map. I paid for a map from I think Huntera for the whole area, and then on the map I started posting every photo of him. I didn't care about any other buck that I wanted to shoot. It was just every photo of him. And I would color code them um, with time of day, all that kind of stuff. And if it was in the middle of the night, it was a different color. And if it was a green pin, it was a daylight photo. And so then
Shootable.
very few. there wasn't as many of those, obviously. And then what was the time of year? And if it was daylight photo in the middle of July, well, who cares as much? I mean, you still care, but not as much. But if it was a daylight photo last year at October 7th, and it was him dog and does October 7th in the daylight, what was the weather pattern? So every green pin is the ones I usually focused on. And I look for green pins during hunting seasons, especially towards the rut. There were certain times he would what I call daylighting every year. Not that he doesn't get up and walk around on a daily basis in his bedding area or wherever, but like most of the places he bedded, like good luck getting in there. Like you're losing him. So I started creating all these photos. Every time I took a photo of him or got a photo of him, I would mark it. I would catalog it for the years. And then I started getting to the point of I'm assuming he's bedding most of the time. My assumption until this point was that he was bedding in this huge hundreds of acres of reed swamp, I call it. Like it's forever. It's insane.
And you did send me a video of that, and you literally can't see more than a foot in front of your face.
Yeah.
So impossible to even go into, let alone hunt.
So I start hunting fringe area access points of this. I start moving cameras to fringe access points of this. And all of a sudden, my photos and sightings of him just like went down to nothing. Next to nothing. I wouldn't say nothing, but next to nothing. And then I'm starting to run into all these other hunters who are coming out of this reed swamp. They're like, I just jumped this huge deer, blah, 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 blah. But you can't see anything. They can just hear a deer running away. Every deer is huge. But then they would talk about the rubs that they had or the rubs that were back there. And so I'm correlating this with it's got to be him, right? I mean, that's your thought process. And then I start getting the same buck coming out of this reed swamp. And he's got mud like all the way. All of his legs are covered in mud. He's got mud up to here. He is a mainframe 6 with 2 drops. Would have loved to shoot that deer. And then he broke off one antler. And I watched him come out, and he was just shredding trees. He was like a bully. He would just shred trees, and he was always covered in mud. And I remember it dawned on me. I'm looking through my map, and I'm looking through my phone, and I'm in the photos I have of Frazier, and I see Frazier on one of the photos I have surrounding that reed swamp. And I look at his legs and I zoom in. It was a daylight photo, and I zoom in on the thing, and there's not a speck of mud on him.
No mud, yeah.
And I'm like, what in the world? How does he go through all that and not have any mud on him? And that's when I started going, he's not in there. He's going through these spots, these access points, and he's just not checking does right now. Like, he's not coming from there. It's impossible. And so then I start readjusting to what I'd done through the summer. And then I start finding little access ways and little fingers of stuff. And some of them went right next to roads, and some of them were in. I start seeing rubs along all these overlooked places on bike paths and by bike paths and everything else. But it's like he could always run into that reed swamp if he wanted to, if he had to. But he'd rather not. He's going to take the path of least resistance, and as long as he felt safe. And then you have all those hunters that are just out hunting everybody, going through all of that. He's he just stayed away from it.
Yep.
And one of the fingers, it's swamp on both sides, and it's literally 20 yards wide and comes down to like 10 yards at times, and sometimes there's water running over it. And I put up a camera on that trail, and I got him all the time, and he'd just come down that trail. So I remember in 2000, I think it was 17. No, 17 or 18. I tell my wife that I looked at my map, looked at the year previous, and I said,
I'm going to jump in right here, Manny, because this is a great time to stop. We're gonna save this story. This is a great story. So we're gonna wrap up this segment. We're gonna break this into several segments, but we will finish this story in the next segment. So you're really gonna want to hear what happened on this particular story and what happened with Frazier, monster public land buck. But there's so many interesting things in here, and I'll just recap again. You found a buck in his area on highly pressured land, right? And where he generally lived, right? Then you honed in on him with further scouting off season and things, and you set him to your pattern. Instead of you patterning him, you set him to start doing what you wanted to do into where you could shoot this buck potentially. Then you made this map. You're like a Sherlock Holmes here, putting all these things together, and that's kind of what it takes. You made this map like on the TV shows and movies with the yarn going everywhere. It wasn't like that, but it had all these pins with all this information to not shoot him that year, but to the next year, right? You're using year by year information as to trying to predict the future to when you can intercept him the following year, right?
Better hone your locations for the following year.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. So we'll get back to the exciting conclusion of this story in the next segment. And also, we have a deer IQ test that anybody can take. You can go to the website and take it. It's fun. It is short. It may or may not tell you if you're a great hunter or not, but it's interesting. It's a challenging test, so I'd invite you guys all to take it, and we'll reveal Manny's score when we come back. So definitely check that out. So as we wrap up, here are some key high IQ takeaways and challenges. First, think about Manny's strategies to key in on one buck and how you may do the same. What are you doing to set buck patterns to your benefit, and how might you up your game in this area? And if you like this podcast, depending on where you're listening, consider rating it, commenting, giving a review, and sharing it with a hunting buddy. That really helps the podcast grow and is greatly appreciated. Okay, and next time we will continue with the exciting conclusion to Manny's story and some high IQ strategies from what he learned. You won't want to miss it, and I'll see you then.